I was 17 the summer I began babysitting for the Millers, and back then, I thought it was just another job. Their farmhouse sat at the end of a gravel road, framed by cornfields that whispered in the wind. On warm evenings, I'd sit on the porch in a rocking chair, watching the setting sun stain the sky orange. The children, Sarah, 8, and Jacob, 6, would wind around my legs, begging for stories. Sarah braided my dark hair while I read aloud. Jacob hid behind the couch cushions and sprung out to scare me until we both laughed. They had the kind of trust that felt sacred. But that last night, everything changed. I remember walking up the wooden porch steps and noticing the front door was ajar. That was odd. Mr. Miller was meticulous. Every latch clicked tight. I stepped inside holding my backpack, calling out, "I'm here." The kitchen smelled like fresh-baked rolls and pine cleaner. Sarah's doll sat on the counter, her dress spotless. The lights were dimmed, and the clocks ticking filled the room. Mrs. Miller met me in the hallway. Her bonnet was still on, and her eyes were wide and wet. She handed me the keys to the back door. I stared at them. She never did this. "If someone knocks," she said, voice just above a whisper, "don't let them in. Not even if they say they're family." I forced a smile, the way you do when a friend says something cryptic you don't understand. "Okay," I said softly. She nodded once and went upstairs. I went to the kids. They were on the rug with coloring books. Sarah looked up and grinned. That was normal. But there was a tension in the air, a quiet dread I couldn't name. I read them "Goodnight, Moon," then tucked them in. I kissed Sarah's forehead, Jacob's cheek. I lingered a moment, letting them fall asleep. The house felt still. I paced, whispering Bible verses to myself, trying to shake the hush. I checked the locks. All secure, except the back door. Loose. I clicked it shut, heart pounding. Midnight came. It was hot. I stepped onto the porch and heard crickets in the field. I breathed deep. I told myself I was being silly. I went back inside. At 2 a.m., I turned on lights in the living room. I plugged in the record player. Soft hymns helped. The clock ticked. Creak, creak. No footsteps. No whisper. But something shifted, like a shadow in the corner. I stared until I convinced myself it was the floor settling. By morning, the oatmeal was still cooling, the plates undone, half-eaten. I woke the kids. They looked up at me bleary-eyed. "Mom and Dad?" Jacob asked. I hesitated. They stepped out for a moment. I lied. But by 7 a.m., panic had begun. I called Mr. Miller's cell. Straight to voicemail. Mrs. Miller's phone, too. By 8 a.m., the sheriff arrived. A tall man with tired eyes and a worn uniform. He asked questions. I told him about the keys, the back door, the locked front door. I told him Sarah's doll. He scribbled in his notebook, asked few questions. I watched him check the floors, the rooms. But something in his manner told me nothing here was unusual to him. We went to the field where their buggy had been found. Turned over, harness snapped. No horses, no footprints, only that buggy. Near the edge, Sarah's doll lay face down in the grass. I asked, "What does it mean?" The sheriff's face was flat. "Accident," he said. "No foul play unless we find evidence." That's when Mrs. Miller's warning replayed in my mind. Don't let them in. Not even if they say they're family. Who was they? The sheriff left. He told me I'd be contacted if anything came up. But over the weeks, I heard nothing. The case went quiet. Press faded. Church discussions died out. And the house sat empty. I returned twice that month to get leftover things. My knitting book, my coat. The door was open. I chalked it up to the sheriff or someone doing an inventory. But once I noticed muddy boot prints in the pantry, never in the living room, hallway, or bedrooms. Just the pantry. Couldn't be me. I don't wear boots. Sheriff said maybe county home team, but they never admitted searching. Months turned into years. I moved out of my parents' house. I got married. I had 2 kids. I kept their memory alive. I kept Sarah's hair ribbon, blue with white polka dots. I kept the memory of her braid in my hair when I slept. I'd place the ribbon on my nightstand and whisper a prayer every night. 10 years after the disappearance, I was clearing our garage. My 7-year-old stumbled on a battered VHS tape with a handwritten label, 1992, Sewing Circle. I felt the same chill I did on that final night. I refused to watch. I threw it in the trash bin. But later, curiosity killed my fear. It was late. The kids were asleep, and I couldn't stop thinking about that tape. It was sitting in the trash bin in the garage, half covered by an old newspaper. I stood there in the dark for a few minutes, hand hovering over the lid, heart racing like I was reaching into something forbidden. Finally, I pulled it out, brushed off the dust and grease, and held it to the light. It was labeled in faded black marker, 1992, Sewing Circle. The handwriting was neat, delicate, and Amish, absolutely. I recognized it. Probably Mrs. Yoder's. I held the tape like it might shatter. My husband walked in behind me and asked what I was doing. I told him I wasn't sure. He shrugged, kissed my head, and went back to bed. He knew better than to ask questions about the Millers anymore. I slid the tape into the old VCR, still hooked up to our guest room TV, because my husband liked to watch black and white films on weekends. The VCR whirred to life with a grinding hum. For a second, I thought the tape might jam. Then the screen flickered to static, and slowly, it warmed up into that analog fuzziness I hadn't seen in years. The footage began simple. Women sitting in a circle inside someone's barn, sewing and laughing, the kind of communal comfort that used to feel so normal back then. The camera was handheld, a bit shaky, sometimes zooming in too close on fabrics or faces. You could hear snippets of conversations in low German, broken now and then by the giggles of children running by. It was warm, familiar, safe. 10 minutes passed. Nothing remarkable. I considered stopping, but something held me there. And then the camera panned, slowly, almost accidentally, like whoever held it was looking for something or someone. It drifted left across the yard, past a quilt hanging on the line, and there they were, the Millers, all four of them, standing behind the quilt like shadows. Mrs. Miller was in her usual sky blue dress, apron tied tight. Mr. Miller wore his brimmed hat, arms crossed. The children stood close, Sarah clutching Jacob's hand. They weren't moving, just standing, still, staring, not at the camera, but somewhere off-screen. Their faces were blank, not expressionless, but unreadable, like they were bracing for something. And behind them, almost hidden, was a man. He wore plain clothes, not Amish, no hat, no beard, a soft flannel shirt that looked too clean. His hand rested lightly on the small of Mrs. Miller's back. Not possessive, not affectionate, just there. She smiled faintly, but her eyes were dead. No sparkle, no recognition, just a frozen mask. Then she said something. Her lips barely moved, but the camera's microphone picked it up. A whisper, clear as day. He shouldn't be here. That phrase. I sat up straight. I rewound. Played it again. He shouldn't be here. She didn't yell it. She didn't plead. But the tone, it was more terrifying than a scream. It wasn't fear of a stranger. It was dread of someone known. I watched the clip 5 more times. Every detail. The way Jacob shuffled behind her. The way Sarah pressed into her brother's side. The way Mr. Miller stood just slightly apart from the group, like he didn't agree with what was happening but couldn't stop it. And that man, calm, too calm, his fingers twitching slightly behind her. I grabbed my phone and recorded that segment off the TV. I couldn't sit on this. Not again. I emailed it to the local newspaper editor with a simple subject line. Watch this. No explanation. No context. Just the footage. They called me within the hour. By the next week, the article was live. Mysterious man in Amish family video, who is he? It went viral. Facebook groups picked it up. Reddit forums. Some said the footage gave them chills. Others tried to digitally enhance the man's face. But no one could identify him. Until someone did. An elderly woman from a nearby Amish community came forward quietly to a mutual friend. She wouldn't give her full name, but she spoke with urgency. Elias, she said. That's Elias. He was excommunicated in 1989. For something we don't speak about. I pressed her gently. She said Elias had lingered for years, especially near the miller's farm. He offered to help, she said, to fix fences, move hay, borrow tools, but he made people uncomfortable, especially Ruth, that's Mrs. Miller. She told me once, "I don't like the way he watches the children." My stomach dropped. I asked what happened to him. "He left," she whispered, "or disappeared. No one knows. Maybe the English took him." But I didn't believe that. I needed more. I found an address listed to a man named Elias from that era. The homestead had been abandoned for years. The barn had collapsed in on itself. The main house was boarded up. Spray paint on the walls, red, keep out in thick red lines. I walked around back. Chickens clucked somewhere in the distance. But the place was hollow. No mail. No footprints. Just silence. I filed a public records request at the courthouse. Searched for any complaints, incidents, legal proceedings with his name. Nothing. Either he was erased or protected. Last week, I was organizing old boxes in our attic, keepsakes from my teenage years. Inside a manila envelope marked Sarah, July, I found a crumpled sketch. I didn't recognize it at first. But then I saw the house in the drawing, the miller's porch, down to the dented railing. In front stood the family, holding hands, smiling. But in the corner stood a tall, undefined figure. No eyes, no mouth, just a blank shape in a man's clothes, arms stretched toward Mrs. Miller's back. Almost touching, but not quite. The only color in the sketch was red, just a faint mark, like a thread drawn across the man's sleeve. I stared at it for hours. That was Sarah's way of telling me, of remembering what she couldn't say out loud. I took the drawing and the VHS to the sheriff's office. New sheriff now, young, serious. He watched the footage frame by frame. His face never changed. I asked, "Do you know who he is?" He hesitated. "There are theories," he said. "Nothing confirmed." "Is he alive?" "We don't know. We haven't had a confirmed sighting in years." I walked out of that office feeling like I was stepping back into fog. That evening, I drove out to the old Miller house. My kids were in the back seat, sleepy. I parked in the dirt patch where the buggy used to rest. Weeds had grown tall. The porch sagged. "Why are we here, Mommy?" my daughter asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out Sarah's ribbon. Faded now, fraying at the edges, but still soft, still warm. I handed it to her. She turned it in her hands, curious. "Who gave you this?" "A little girl," I said softly. "She used to braid my hair." There was silence. And then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "What happened to her?" I looked at the porch. "They didn't leave," I said. "Someone made sure they couldn't come back." She looked up at me, confused. "Why?" I swallowed hard. "Because some people aren't meant to be here. But they come anyway." And when they do, they take things no one can ever replace. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the porch. The wind moved through the corn behind the house. It sounded like whispers. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought I heard Sarah's voice on the breeze.